הניסים ועל הברכן ועל הגבורות ועל התשועות ועל הנפלאות, על הניסים ועל הברכן ועל הגבורות ועל התשועות ועל הנפלאות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה, בזמן הזה שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה.
Welcome to Jewish Life, a program presented in cooperation with the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York. I'm your host, Stewart Ain. Every week we present programs of particular interest to the Jewish community. Today we're going to do part 2 of our look into the American Jewish archives in Cincinnati. And joining us is the Executive Director, Gary Zola. He's also the Edward Ackerman Family Distinguished Professor of the American Jewish Experience and Reform Jewish History at Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in Cincinnati. And helping me in the questioning is Mollie Newman. She's Director of Marketing for a huge synagogue in Cincinnati, Ohio. In fact, Mollie, why don't you show us the lead into the next document, or it's actually a recording, right?
Yeah, thanks, Stewart. So, Dr. Zola, we have heard about some recordings that you have from Rabbi Stephen Wise. I think you may have about 173 recordings that are digitized, but there's one that really sticks out. It's about the 1940 book, Native Son. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yes, I would be very happy to do that. First of all, I'm going to share my screen and welcome everybody back to the American Jewish Archives. Here is a photo of Rabbi Wise, one of his famous photos, who's had a number of very dramatic photos that we have at the American Jewish Archives, which, as the audience knows, is located on the historic Cincinnati campus of Hebrew Union College. And the recordings that you ask about, Mollie, are really remarkable. They were made on what we would call aluminum albums. And for those who are under 30, an album is like a CD-ROM, except about this big. And the aluminum albums is something people have rarely seen because it was a fast recording device. You could record and then play back quickly. And these were lost. Many of the albums were destroyed during the war because aluminum was melted down, or they were destroyed because they were played on a plastic long playing record machine, which the diamond needle would ruin it. But these somehow survived in a closet, and they were rediscovered about 20 years ago, and they're all at the AJA. They don't exist anywhere else. And I'll tell you, I'm going to switch it up on you a little, Mollie, because I decided I wanted to play this one clip, which is a little shorter than the one you were asking about. Basically, these are recordings from his sermons that he delivered at Carnegie Hall, starting in the year 1934 and running through the year 1942. And Wise rarely preached on strictly religious topics. He always preached on things that were going on in the world. And his services were held at Carnegie Hall on a Sunday, and often that auditorium was filled to capacity, and they would record it and then later in the day play it on radio. That's how we have these recordings. 10 days before World War II breaks out for the Americans, that is before Pearl Harbor, Stephen Wise delivered a talk. We're already at war. The war is already going on. The Americans are not yet in it. But Wise talks about what the impact of the war is going to be on on the Jewish people around the world. And he gives a powerful sermon and he tells a story that he has read about in the press. And he recounts this story and draws his lesson as to what the ultimate meaning of the suffering and the difficulty that he's heard about already going on in Europe is going to be for the Jewish people. This is a chance for us. This goes back to the year 1940, the end of 1940. So we are listening to something that is almost 80 years old, and you'll be able to hear as if you were in the audience listening to him. Now, I believe I checked the audio. So Mollie, tell me if this doesn't come through when I start to play it. As you see, it's 1941.
Story of Rabbi Werner in one of the neighboring countries of Germany, who was captured by the Gestapo, tortured and mocked, and finally, for it was the Sabbath, these Gestapo agents turned to Rabbi Werner, and they force him, after stripping him of his garments, tear the wedding ring from his hand, teeth which are not even capable of sustaining the effort. And then after these false teeth of this aged rabbi have been ground under the heels of a stormtrooper, they turn to him and say, "Today is the Sabbath. You are going to preach today. You will preach your sermon to us." Rabbi Werner preaches the sermon to them as they interrupt him with blows and kicks. And the subject of his address that day, the sermon he would have preached to his congregation, was upon the theme, all men are human, sinners, wrongdoers. The apparently wicked and ruthless and cruel, still they are human. Finally, as the essence of what the rabbi is saying breaks into their consciousness, the stormtroopers, overwhelmed with viciousness and guilt, turn to him and say, "And are we too human? You consider us human also?" And they rain blows and kicks and cruelties upon him. Answer, they say, "Are we human?" And in one of the great moments of Jewish history, Rabbi Werner turns to them in the midst of all their cruelties and horrors heaped upon him, and answers in the essence of the Jewish spirit, "Doch, doch, even you are human. Despite all that they may do, despite all that they might do." In other words, the Jewish understanding that there is humanity which cannot be destroyed in any man will not be broken. Herein the Jew rises victorious above 1,000 Gestapos and 10,000 Nazis. Triumphs as it triumphed through ages of persecution past.
That's really a remarkable recording, isn't it? This is what he says, that despite all the sufferings that the Jews are currently enduring, and of course he didn't know the extent of it, that in the end we will flourish and will remain committed to the values of humanity. And there the audience really gets to hear the kind of preacher he was. We don't have that kind of preaching anymore today, but it's really, and how much powerful think it is to students today to hear, not to read what he said, but to actually hear him deliver it. That's the value of preserving of history.
Now, you also have some recordings of Martin Luther King. Now, everybody's heard his voice, but not necessarily in synagogues. Is that right?
That's right. Let me really get to that. I'm going to quickly show you a picture of Dr. King. Okay, you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yes, many people don't realize that Dr. King, when after the Montgomery boycott came to an end and he launched into the actual civil rights movement that would be nationwide, whenever he was invited to a synagogue to speak and teach about his movement and what he had in mind for America, he would go. And we have at the American Jewish Archives a number of transcripts of those addresses, but we've collected a few audio recordings. And I'm going to play just a clip of Dr. King speaking very early in his career, really almost right after the Montgomery boycott in 1958. He went to Evanston, Illinois, and he spoke at a synagogue there called Beth Emet. And fortunately, the congregation decided to record him. And the congregation reposited a copy of that rare recording. This exists here with us. And listen carefully to what Dr. King says to this Jewish congregation in Evanston, Illinois in 1958. By the way, all these recordings are available to the public. That's what we do. There's no fee for any of this. We make this, we serve the public.
But I want to say to you that there are certain things within our social system to which I'm proud to be maladjusted, and to which I call upon you to be maladjusted. I never intend to adjust myself to the evils of segregation and the crippling effects of discrimination. I never intend to become adjusted to the madness of militarism and the self-defeating effects of physical violence. This evening I call upon you to be maladjusted to all of these things. For you see, it may be that the salvation of our world lies in the hands of the maladjusted. I call upon you to be maladjusted. Yes, as maladjusted as Amos, who in the midst of the tragic injustices of his day could cry out in terms that echo across the generations, "Let judgment run down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream." As maladjusted as Lincoln, who had the vision to see that this nation could not exist half slave and half free. As maladjusted as Jefferson, who in the midst of an age amazingly adjusted to slavery could cry out in terms lifted to cosmic proportion, "All men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness."
You know, I've always felt when I heard this, you know, how brilliant this man was. Notice he is so attentive to the audience that to which he is speaking. He knows he's not going to mention some quote from the New Testament. He speaks about Amos. He speaks about the Constitution. He speaks about the founders of the nation. And of course, he tells the Jewish audience to be maladjusted. And Jews, you know, often pride themselves on being countercultural. And he seems to identify that. He calls them out and he says, you know, don't go along with the rest of the crowd. Be maladjusted to what really isn't normal and isn't right. And you see his message is so timely, isn't it? It really, it's so pertinent to today as well. We do have quite a bit on Dr. King.
Yes, that's wonderful. It's really, really awesome to hear his voice like that at a synagogue. There also is a moving story about the USS Dorchester, the ship that was torpedoed by the Nazis during the war. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Absolutely, it'd be my pleasure. I'm going to put a picture up right now of the Dorchester. I hope you can see it. That's a picture of it. The Dorchester was, as you can see, a transport ship, and it was torpedoed by the Nazis on February 1 in the morning, the 3rd, 1943, and a transport ship, for those who don't know, means it wasn't a warship, a fighter like that. It was trying to carry troops from one place to another. And at 1 in the morning, the ship was hit. There was total pandemonium. It was dark outside. Many of the soldiers and sailors who were on this ship disobeyed orders and were not sleeping in their life preservers. The description of it from the survivors, it was almost total pandemonium. There were 4 clergy chaplains who were on that transport ship, each one going to a different assignment. And one of those clergy people was, I'll show you a picture now of them. These are the 4 chaplains who are on the Dorchester, and you see the 3rd picture is a picture of Rabbi Alexander Good. Rabbi Good was a graduate of the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, and he enlisted as a chaplain during World War II. Well, evidently, all of these chaplains gathered together on the deck, and they provided their soldiers who were fleeing, trying to get on the lifeboats, with gloves and with life preservers and doing what they could. And then when the ship started to go down, they themselves held on to one another, and the lifeboats attested to the fact that the 4 chaplains, each from a different religion, 2 Protestants, 1 Roman Catholic, and a rabbi, all held hands and recited psalms together and perished. And that story became emblematic of American religion and American unity after World War II. Very, very famous. Now, it's always good to have documentary evidence as to what exactly transpired. And here on your right, you see a photo of a letter that was sent to a chaplain in New York in 1955, probably 13, 14 years after the event, by, as you can see down here, a man named John Mahoney. Now, John Mahoney is probably not a Jewish name, sounds kind of Irish to me. And I have transcribed for the audience over here on the left the exact wording from the letter. And what the letter is it's an attempt. I guess the letter, it looks like it was dated in 44, not 55. It was received by the American Jewish Archives at the bottom there in 55, but it was dated in 44. So just the following year, I should say. And I want to begin by bringing us down to where my mouse is here, where it says about about the chaplain Good, Rabbi Good, whom I know you are interested in. He's writing to another Jewish chaplain. I would put him down as a regular guy and a very good shipmate. In proof thereof, I recall very well, after putting on my parka and my life preserver, I went out onto the promenade deck where I might say confusion reigned. There I found I had no gloves. Chaplain Good was handy and remarked to him my predicament, and I added, I'm going to go back and get them. Never mind, he said to me, I have 2 pairs, and I will give you 1 pair of them. I agreed, and he peeled off a pair of gloves from his hands and handed them to me. Shortly after this, about 10 or 15 minutes, I was overboard myself. And after swimming around a while, I landed in a lifeboat that was awash. There was about a foot or less at the ends of the boat that was still out of the water. So it was half sunk. Now, as the official temperature of this water was 30 degrees, then I am positive that I never could have held on for over 8 hours if my hands had not been covered. So I would like to credit Chaplain Good with helping to save my life, as it was only the 2 of us survived out of about 40 that were clinging to that boat. And that is that letter, which was sent to us by that chaplain, arrived at the American Jewish Archives in 1955, written in 1944, is testimony to the heroism of Rabbi Good, but I'm sure all of the chaplains. It's a very famous story. There was a U.S. postage stamp made of the 4 chaplains. It's really a remarkable tale.
Great.
Do you have another one you can show us? Another
Sure,
document?
I do. In fact, I'd like to show you something that I think is very interesting, and that has to do with women in the American rabbinate. You know that we are about to mark, in the year 2022, we are going to be marking the 50th anniversary of the ordination of women rabbis. And that's a big moment because back in 1972, when Rabbi Sally Prezan, I'm going to show you a picture of her as a student at the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati. And I really like this picture. Here she was probably still studying at the University of Cincinnati. And the reason I like this picture best of all is because I'm going to circle something so you can see. You see, it's hard to make that out, but that says the American Jewish Archives. She's standing in front of the American Jewish Archives as a young woman. She was ordained in 1972, and at that time, it was thought that this was going to be a schism, that in fact, liberal Judaism would break off from all the rest of Judaism, and no one would accept women being religious leaders. Well, here we are 50 years later, and every single component of the Jewish people, both in the United States, in Europe, and in Israel, Reform, conservative, even modern Orthodox, have begun to accept religious leaders who are women. I have a recording of Rabbi Prezan from the year 1975. I'm going to play to you now for you, a little clip. What was she doing in 1975? Well, she had only been a rabbi for 3 years, and she was at a rabbinical conference in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the year 1975, marking the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Hebrew Union College. And there was a program at this conference on the future of the American rabbinate. And they invited about 5 or 6 rabbis to speak. And the last speaker was Rabbi Prezan. Now, Mollie and Stewart, I want you to bear in mind, she's speaking now in front of probably several hundred men. She's the only woman. And I want you to listen to what Rabbi Prezan says at this convention in 1975. 3 years she's ordained, and we're about to celebrate the 50th anniversary.
The rabbinate has always been an exclusive, elite male club. When I was ordained 3 years ago, I had reason to believe that basic religious equality, granted to women, at least on paper, since the early days of our movement, was at last to become a reality. I have questioned that assumption many times in recent months. My questioning occurs when I venture outside of my own synagogue, particularly when I come to conventions such as this. Sunday night, I heard one of our speakers refer to rabbis as sons of Israel, and I shuddered. Yesterday, I was present when the list of our new members was read. One name among them belonged to the second woman ordained by our movement, and yet our speaker began the list of names by saying, "The following men have been elected to membership." This morning I worshiped at the college chapel and prayed along with you that the perpetual light might cast its radiance into the lives of all men, that our sons might be taught by the Lord, and that he who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, might also bless those who faithfully devote themselves to the community together with all of their brothers. I would like to believe that you do not intentionally deny my existence as a rabbi and as a woman, but sometimes you make that very difficult for me.
You know, it's so important that we preserve these recordings, because today, when there's literally, and I'm not exaggerating, thousands, more than 1,000 women rabbis around the world, it's very important to remember the pathway that brought us here. And here you have Rabbi Prezan pointing out so many things that would change over the course of 50 years, you know, the language we use, the way we approach women in leadership positions. Not that we've accomplished everything and that there are no problems, but you see how courageous it must have been for her to stand in front of hundreds of male colleagues and say what she had on her mind. This is how future generations will understand the past.
Very good. Listen, we've run out of time. I just want to thank you, Gary Zola, Mollie Newman, for joining me. My name is Stewart Ain. Until next week, we'll see you then.
Thank you.
Thank you.